do you really know who you are? And that brings me to my question for you. When did you know that you actually had a brand? At what point did you know I actually have a brand?
Sensation Nation.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Sensation Nation. I am excited to introduce my guest today, but first I want to talk about my topic. A few years ago, I was professionally agitated in a good way by a lieutenant colonel who kept asking me every time he saw me, "Shooter, what is your brand?" And I was just kind of beating my head on the wall, like, I think my brand is this and X, Y, and Z. And every other day or so, I knock on his door and I was like, "Hey, sir, my brand is mentorship." He's like, no, that's not your brand. That's not your brand. And I will tell you, I tried that numerous times to go by his office and said, "I got it figured out. I know what my brand is." And he never gave me the thumbs up. Like, no. Every time it was like, "That's not your brand." So even to this day, and that's been about 4 years ago, I had a long discussion with my wife about it at breakfast this morning. And I was like, what does this mean? You know, that kind of thing. And so I have brought on a guest to hopefully help me unpack that, hopefully help you understand what it means to have a brand, or what is a brand, and all that other good stuff. So ultimately, I watched this gentleman that I'm about to introduce from afar. I've only physically met him once, and I know that he has his hands in a lot of things. He's got a lot of connections all over the place. It's very hard to find someone that doesn't know him, or at least hasn't heard of his name. So with that, I want to bring on to the show someone that I just found out was an Alabama fan of all things, and I didn't realize that until right before this recording. So I actually wore my Georgia shirt on purpose because we're talking about brand, and I am simply somewhat of a brand ambassador for the Georgia Bulldogs. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Colonel Michael Black, United States Air Force, retired.
Well, thank you, Shooter. It's great to be here, and I really appreciate what you do with Sensation Nation, your podcast, and how you get after it and talk to folks about things. I will have to make a comment about the Georgia shirt, just because I did spend some time in Georgia, quite a bit of time in Georgia with my dad growing up when he was in the military. But I was born in Alabama. I'm born in Tuskegee, and became a big time Alabama fan as I was growing up, watching sports and things, and just followed Alabama football, baseball, and basketball, really all sports. But Alabama football has been known as a powerhouse, as has Georgia, with
Back to back.
back to back championships, and trying to go for that three-peat now. But that is something about brand. You can speak of Georgia's Bulldogs brand. You can speak of the Crimson Tide brand. You can speak of the Southeastern Conference brand of football. But that is an identity that we're talking about. And for me, branding is really an identity. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be able to talk about brand and get into the questions and the conversation that we're going to have. So thank you once again for having me.
Absolutely. Extremely excited about this conversation and where it's going to go. I know I will leave here more educated, and finally you might be able to help me after 4 years understand what this is all about. So I know about 5 years or so ago, you actually led a conversation and it was titled "A Leader Establishing a Brand During Change." And I was able to kind of take a look through your briefing talking points there, and it actually enlightened me a little bit. But I want to ask you, and for the audience, for the viewers, for the listeners, first and foremost, before we even start talking about what is your brand, I want to hear from you, sir. Like, what is a brand to you?
So, for me, a brand, if I could think of like a synonym for the word brand, I think about identity, and maybe your shape And we use a lot of acronyms in the military, and so SHAPE does have an acronym. I actually cannot take credit for this acronym, but in a book, The Purpose Driven Life by Rick Warren, he talks about understanding your shape and developing your shape, and shape is your spiritual gifts for the S, your heart for the H, your abilities for the A, your personality for the P, and then your experiences. And so when I think about brand, I think about those two things. I think about your identity, kind of who you are, whether it's as a person or your service or your product, and then your shape and how we are shaped. And again, not here to preach to you, but the spiritual gifts that we are given from the good Lord, those are part of who we are and how those shape us. The heart, I mean, that's your life, and that's who you are, and things come from the heart. You preach from the heart, you talk from the heart, those kind of things. Then the P, or A, the abilities. I mean, it's just your God-given abilities, and then those abilities that you nurture and train over the years. You get better, whether there's certifications, whether there's education, like you're going through right now, and then the advanced education that you're going to be going through. All of those kind of things are your abilities, of course, your personality, just who you are. And then obviously your experiences, and there can be a lot of things that go in with experiences, life experiences. They could be good experiences, they could be painful experiences, but your experiences. And so that is really, for me, what a brand is. I've got my crest on here from the Air Force Academy. That's part of of a brand. People see that and say, "Hey, what class were you?" Class 85. They know that. Underneath, I've got my AFCEA shirt on. That's a brand. That logo is a brand. So sometimes, even brands are recognized by logos. The Nike on the polo shirt. All of those kind of things are part of a brand, but it's an identity of who you are.
I like that. I like that. We just got started and you've already helped me. I will say, and we're going to come back to AFCEA as well as AFCOMA here in just a little bit. But, as we continue to peel the layers of the onion back, and as I discussed this with my wife this morning, initially when I tried to answer that Lieutenant Colonel's question about what my brand was, I kept telling him what I did, and what I was doing. Like, well, I'm a mentor, and things like that. And it's like, well, that's part of it. But, you continue to peel the onion back. It's like layer after layer after layer, and you get down to the bulb of the onion. And I think ultimately that will help you get to the heart of what your brand truly is. All those layers, I definitely 100% agree that those are a part of your overall brand. And then there's a core in there as well. So similar to the professional agitation that I received, which has been really driving me crazy in a good way and just helping me to really figure out who I am and what my inner core is. Sir, I want to toss that back to you a little bit, right? And just pretending that, you and my audience just hopped into the elevator and you're going to the top floor of the Burj Khalifa, tallest building in the world. And you've got some time to just talk to them, and they ask you, hey, sir, what is your brand? How would you respond to that?
That's a great question. I mean, I think, for me, my brand is really, I consider myself a connector. And by that, I mean, I bring people together to achieve a common objective. I bring people together who need to know each other, or I feel like would be a good fit. And this goes back to what I was talking about, Shooter, when I talked about experiences, my experiences. Real quick, just to kind of help shape the experiences, just like to just tell you, who I am and how I got to be, so that will put some things in the context. I'm 60 years old. I'm a military brat. My dad was in the Army. He did communications in the Army, and so he was Signal Corps. I moved all around. I've been to, 48 of the 50 states. I've been to over 50 countries, even lived over in Ethiopia as a 5-year-old with him when Haile Selassie was still alive. and was the emperor over there. And so, you start thinking about your experiences and what you have experienced. And so I lived in Africa, East Africa, for 2.5 years. I got to see Haile Selassie before, very historic leader and emperor. The first school that I went to was an Italian school.
Wow.
I wasn't old enough to go to school on the base because my birthday was in February. And my mom said, well, you're going to school. My parents were, both college graduates, HBCU graduates. Mom went to Alabama A&M, dad went to Tuskegee. So I went to an Italian school and had to learn Italian and go, that was my lesson. Thankfully, our maid, whose name was Babette, could speak 7 languages, to include Italian. There's a lot of Italian influence in Ethiopia. And so she would help me with my Italian and help me with my school. And we'd have conversations at the breakfast table, and my mom would have no idea what we're talking about because we're talking in Italian. But then you fast forward to all of the experiences, over years. So moving around, then joining the Air Force myself, going to the Air Force Academy, and then joining the Air Force and having 13 assignments. And in 26 years, you do the math, I move about every 2 years. So been a lot of places, lived over in Korea, lived in England, culminated my career at the White House with the Executive Office of the President as the commander of the White House Communications Agency. So I went everywhere with President Bush and President Obama, everywhere, whether it was shave ice, getting shave ice for his daughter, or whether it was the Olympics in Beijing, or whether it was the Nobel Peace Prize, Iraq, Afghanistan, and everywhere in between. So all of those experiences shaped me. Commander 3 times. And so the first time I became a commander, I said, I need to develop my command philosophy. I learned that at Army Command and Joint Staff College in a leadership course that I took, where it was ingrained in the Army officers that you will have a command philosophy and you will present that to your organization when you take command. I took that to heart. Again, the age in shape, and developed my command philosophy, which is founded on the 5 F's: family, fitness, flying, fair, and fun. Easy to remember. You've got 5 fingers, starts with the letter F, fingers start with the letter F, the 5 F's. So family, fitness, flying, fair, and fun. And so that started to become part of my identity of who I am. And I didn't make that up myself. I had a mentor who had a command philosophy who had 3 F's. And I met him when I was a major, and I took that to heart. And then when I left that assignment, went to school, I was like, okay, I like that. Let me add on to that. And I made it to 5 F's, kind of easy to remember, with a hand. And so I can go into detail about the 5 F's, but that's really who that's my identity and my brand. So anybody that has been assigned to any place that I've been since I was a major, so commanded 3 times since I was a major, 2 squadrons, and then wing command equivalent, but then other places. You ask anybody who's in my unit, they know the 5 F, so they'll remember that. So much so, goes along with your brand, that I've run into people who worked for people who worked for me, and they come back to me and say, hey, sir, such and such says his command philosophy is the 5 F's. Right. And I thought that was yours. And I said, well, he used to work for me, or she used to work for me, and they've adopted that. And so that's, when people start picking up your brand and making it part of their brand, mm-hmm. I mean, mm-hmm. It really resonates that, you're getting your message across, and people are, digesting it and internalizing it.
I like that, and that is perfect. As always, it's such a seamless transition, because prior to this recording, I didn't want to, but the more I thought about it and talked about it, I was like, I have to. I didn't want to Google the definition of brand, and I didn't want to Google the definition of brand ambassador. But right before this recording, I said, well, I have to, because I didn't want it to drive my discussion. And what you just mentioned to me was the fact that, those 5 F's, right? It's a legacy that continues to carry on through other people, which will continue to carry on through other people. And to me, that is equivalent to being able to create brand ambassadors. You talk about brand ambassadors in sports, right? I'm a brand ambassador for the Georgia Bulldogs and whatnot,
Yes,
right?
sir.
And you've got other people that are carrying out your brand without you even being there, which I think is amazing. So I actually have the 5 F's here for everyone to see. And you're right, it's easy to remember. And it's something that people can actually continue to filter down, right? And, just to be able to start that and just to keep that ball rolling, I think is amazing. So my next point, though, is last night I took my wife to see Janet Jackson. Janet Jackson concert was amazing. My wife was she was floored to see Janet Jackson, and it's awesome. And I see people like Janet Jackson, and I'll use her as an example because that's very recent and current to me. And I wonder sometimes, do people like Janet Jackson realize they're Janet Jackson? Like, do you really know who you are? And that brings me to my question for you. When did you know that you actually had a brand? At what point did you know I actually have a brand?
That's a great question, Shooter. I would be telling a tale if I told you that I always knew that. I didn't, but as I reflect back on my career thus far, and it's still ongoing, I think the first time that I took command and really took it to heart to give my command philosophy to my team and hear them talk about it and hear others talk about it, and then move on and go to another assignment and then bump into people who were either in your unit or know people that were in your unit. And then, when people come back and tell you, hey, I heard about your command philosophy. I know it's the 5F such and such told me. It started, really resonating with me that, wow, my message was getting across to folks. I was fortunate enough to command again. So I went to the air staff in between commands and went to Langley Air Force Base and commanded the base communication squadron there. So it was a much larger than my first command at Combat Com in Georgia, nearly 500 people in that unit. And I have to say this because I remember it, and I preached this to our folks at Langley. We had 18 generals on that base. We had 200 colonels, 06s, and we had 250 chiefs, E9s. And I was responsible for my unit was responsible for the network, telephones, computers, internet, you name it. I never got a call and said, hey, Mike Black, thanks for the dial tone. Never got one of those calls, but let us have a hiccup or, the internet be down, phones be down. Some way they would find a way to get in touch with you. But I say that to say, use the same command philosophy, preach that to the organization, and really we became a well-oiled machine there. And that was, early on we talked about senior NCOs and the influence, and you mentioned the senior master sergeant that influenced you. I had a great crop of senior NCOs at that squadron, 5 chiefs in my squadron.
Wow.
But my superintendent, rest in peace, Mick Johnson, led that organization and corralled the chiefs and the NCOs, and they embraced my brand, my identity, and made it part of theirs. And we were very, very successful at Langley. And it's not about me, but I would just say, we won everything at Langley Air Force Base. Always had a distinguished graduate or 11 or an honor grad in Airman Leadership School in the NCO Academy. Stratifications were off the chain in the squadron. Had the #1 senior NCO, the #1 CGO, the #1 major, the #2 first sergeant, and the #1 squadron commander at some point over those 2 years at Langley.
Wow.
Unheard of in any unit that I have come across. We also won, just about every base championship sport that you could think of: softball, football, basketball, volleyball, over the course. So The unit exuded, confidence, embraced our brand and created a brand for the unit as well. And it's just amazing. So developed it, became even more aware there with the success that we had, and it just kind of followed me on the Air War College after that, and then fortunate enough to command the White House Communications Agency, an even larger unit, now wing command equivalent unit, joint unit, and so you're bringing in all services, and it further validated that the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Coast Guards, the civilians all embraced that brand, that identity, and we did very well there. Obviously, a no-fail mission, providing communication support to the executive office of the president. But again, having that brand and that identity really gave us something to latch on, and it further reminded me that I do have a brand. And as you continue on in your career, you meet folks, you come across folks come across folks that know you. They talk about that feedback comes back to you. In the day of social media, you see posts about this, you see other information. And so I really became aware of that. But I go back to, what I said, the lieutenants and captains that are now lieutenant colonels and colonels that work for me, and they are developing their command philosophy, and they're using the same thing, in some cases identical to what I presented. You become aware. Very long answer to your question. I think it was a long ride up the elevator that we talked about, but you can see I'm passionate about it.
Absolutely.
I just became more aware of that as my career progressed, and even today, I've been retired 10 years, and do that. I've officiated 25 retirement ceremonies since I retired.
Wow.
Folks have asked me to come back, and I think part of that is because of the brand, the identity that we all embraced.
I love it. I think, at this point, I have a podcast mentor and a professional mentor. He kind of serves in multiple roles, but Colonel Gabe Rock. We've interviewed each other on our platforms, and oftentimes we've talked about his experience as well. And he's talked about the benefit and how much joy he found in having his unit and his members of his unit claim him as their commander, even when he's not around and his name comes up and goes, oh yeah, that's my commander. When your people will claim you as their commander and you don't have to force it. I always like to tell people, if you have to say you're it, you're not it. You let your actions speak for itself. And as you just laid out a whole bunch of actions and results that just happen by you doing you and being your brand. Ultimately, you hear a lot that, the organization, I will take it outside of just of a military unit, but organizations will often take on the personalities of their leaders. And if you come in with your brand and it is a solid foundational brand, everyone else will adopt that brand and they will become your brand ambassadors. And in turn, you get great results like you just got right now. As John C. Maxwell always says, he who thinks he leads but has no followers is only taking a walk. So it sounds to me that you've been out there really killing it. And I want to circle back just a little bit to something you mentioned earlier, because one of the questions I was going to ask you was how do you think you got your brand established? And I think you already answered it. And I really love the response about experience. I do believe that your experience will help shape and drive what your brand is and who you are. If we take Nike or any other organization, they all have mission statements and vision statements, and there's success stories and the first dollar they've ever earned, and there's a story behind every single brand that we see. So my question was going to be, how do you think you got your brand established? But I think we've answered it. But it takes me to the next question. From your perspective, do you think that your brand can be something that one can be born with? Or is it something that people just establish over time, or both?
Shooter, I think it's both. In that, I think if you look at some examples, We both are into sports. You look at some sporting examples. Baseball. Grew up playing baseball. Was a fan of the Cincinnati Reds. Ken Griffey played for the Cincinnati Reds, and then you have Ken Griffey Jr., who was an athlete as well. I think went to Cincinnati Moeller High School, which is a very well-known school for everything, but particularly for athletics there in Ohio. But okay, so he's a junior. He's Ken Griffey. His dad, won a couple of World Series at least, and did well. And so, yeah, he was born with some of the stuff that his father, accomplished, but he still had to, be his own and create his own. And so, today we know both who Ken Griffey is and we know who Ken Griffey Jr. is. And we know that Ken Griffey Jr. did some things in addition to what his dad did, and built his own identity and brand. And so I think, yes, you definitely can be born with it. But there are some other examples, and I'm not going to highlight any names. There are some examples where people were not as successful or were not as known for whatever reason. May have been a personal choice or whatever, but as their parents or their relatives. So that's why I say it can be both. I think some people are born with that just because of, again, we go back to those experiences, that E in shape, and you start to experience that stuff, and as you're born and as your parents are training and developing you, they are sharing their experiences, and both good and bad, and lessons learned. But particularly on the experience side, you can create and develop that. And with us both being in the military, we have we've accumulated experience over the years. Whether it's our first assignment, or whether it's the current assignment, or everything in between, and the education and the training that you get. And so all of that helps develop your identity and your brand. And so I definitely think you can develop it as well as being born with some of it. And if you take the time, and once let me go back to hey, when did you recognize that? When you recognize that, then you can also set yourself up for the right training, the right experiences, the right coach, mentor, sponsor to continue to develop your identity. Another long answer to your question, but I do think it's both for those reasons.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. And transitioning to the next question for you. So when we think about, I'll switch away from football and I'll talk basketball. When we think about basketball greats and we talk about brands like LeBron James, he's essentially like a walking brand. Kobe Bryant, a walking brand. Michael Jordan, a walking brand. And it was not easy. If you look at any of their stories, it was not easy for them to earn and achieve their brand. Similar to, again, other big name companies, earning the brand and getting the brand and establishing your brand is one thing, but maintaining it and upholding it is another. Because when you're living on a pedestal like that, people are always looking for things. It's that pressure to be perfect and maintain. So what advice would you offer to someone with regard to upholding and maintaining your brand?
Yeah, you use the sports examples. Let's take Kobe Bryant. I mean, first in the gym, last one out the gym, and so he's working on his craft, all the time. And he recognizes that, he's got to tweak and add these things and adjust, when somebody's going to be double teaming and, passing off and finding the open person. Because it's not just about him scoring, but about making his team better. And each of those that you mentioned, LeBron and Michael Jordan and many others, also made their team better by recognizing time and place for for them to do it. I mean, if it's going to be the last shot, the game-winning shot, obviously all three of those those gentlemen are equipped to do that and ready to take on that challenge. But a lot of times those folks have a lot of assists as well, and triple doubles and all of that kind of stuff. And so they recognize that they could continue to develop and also make their team better, thereby increasing their brand, if you will. It's not just, hey, I'm not just a scorer, but I'm making, my team, even better. I love using sports analogies because I grew up playing sports, and I think it helps us understand, and people can visualize, and a lot of times people can relate to, a favorite athlete or what they see, on television, and it helps in learning, in learning those things.
Very good, sir. I have two other topics that I want to talk about, but they're really more so related to brands that I know that you're associated with and tied into. One of them is the Air Force Cadet Officer Mentor Association, and the other one is the Armed Forces Communications and Electronics Agency. I know that you're tied into both of those. Can you give us a quick rundown of what those two organizations do?
Sure. So for the first one, Air Force Cadet Officer Mentor Association, or AFCOMA, it is a nonprofit professional development type organization that really we strengthen leaders through mentorship. If I could think of three words to describe what AFCOMA does, we do fellowship, scholarship, and mentorship. That's not all we do, but those are three words that come to mind when you talk about that. The reason I'm passionate about that, I'm the vice chairman of AFCOMA, and I was a person that benefited greatly from having mentors in my life. A mentor shortens the learning curve for you. They share their experiences with you. And so, for example, if it took me 10 years to learn something, and then I want to teach my son who's in the Space Force the same kind of things, and if he can learn it in a year, and it took me 10 years to learn it, then that's 9 more years that he can learn other stuff and add to his toolbox, and add to his experience, add to his identity, and all that. So very passionate about that, because all through my career, I had mentors, starting out with my dad, who was a retired colonel in the Army that did communications, and then many along the way. I'd like to add that even the church that I grew up in junior high school, St. Paul United Methodist in Oxon Hill, there were no less than 6 African American colonels in the military in that church. That as a 7th grader, I got to see them and know them. And now, as I reflect back on what those gentlemen brought to the table, 2 of the men in there were original founders of the Army Rocks organization, which is the predecessor to the Air Force Cadet Officer Mentor Association. We were birthed from the Army Rocks. I don't mean predecessor, but we came as a result of the Army Rocks. But those folks were in my church. Another gentleman ended up being the Undersecretary of the Army and the Acting Secretary of the Army at one time, Honorable John Shannon. So I'm exposed to these folks, through my early years. And so as I reflect back on, my experiences, that go back to that E in shape, and in mentorship and developing that, and just how important that was in my life. You fast forward to me being in the Air Force and being a leader, and now in a position to help make a difference, shorten the learning curve for those that follow, train our replacements. I'm passionate about mentorship, as are you, and that's why I stay involved and stay engaged, in that. And we give back, give scholarships back to junior ROTC folks that are going to go pursue a college degree, folks that are in ROTC that are going to become officers. We mentor cadets, and then we mentor, all officers and civilian equivalent. And I just take a lot of pride in our service, in our Air Force, and in all services, and want to make things better. And so, therefore, I'm actively involved in that from the AFCOMA standpoint. AFCEA, as you mentioned earlier, AFCEA is a professional organization, a nonprofit as well, a member-based organization where we bring together the government, industry, and academia to solve IT challenges, IT solutions, bring those entities together to really work issues and challenges for both organizations, if you will, the government and industry. Today we're doing a lot more collaboration with industry than we did when I first came in the service. When I first came in the service, the military was, building their own products and equipment. And if you think about that, to sustain that, that can become quite expensive over years. And why not use the technology that is out there in the public sector and make that adapt that to what we do in the military. And so I'm fortunate enough to take the position as Vice President for Defense for AFCEA International. Our headquarters is in Fairfax. And again, my task is to be that liaison for the Department of Defense. We put on about 4 major trade shows, and then we have chapters that put on events and that kind of thing. But I bring together the Department of Defense and help put the agenda and drive the agenda for our trade shows. Our events are known as TechNet, TechNet Cyber, which we just finished up in Baltimore, TechNet Augusta, which we have coming up in Augusta, Georgia, TechNet Indo-Pacific in the November timeframe that deals around the Indo-Pacific area of responsibility. And then we have one that's just called West, which is very sea service focused. We do that in partnership with the United States Naval Institute in San Diego. And so again, if you look back at my brand or my identity, it's not a surprise that I'm involved in those kind of organizations, because that's my brand. That's what I like to do. And it's not really like work when you're doing, if you're doing something that you really like to do, you're
not really working.
Right.
That's right.
And so hence, both of those organizations, I appreciate you asking about both of those. I'm very, very passionate about mentorship from the AFCOMA standpoint. And then, my craft is information technology, cyber, and to still be around that after being retired for 10 years and still making a difference and still doing some mentorship, even within AFCEA is a true blessing.
That's pretty awesome. I heard you mention Augusta. That's where I was born. I was born in Augusta, Georgia, a small city called Thompson. So very excited to hear that you all are doing things there as well. I think they have the cyber center there. So as I mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, this gentleman has his hands in a lot of things. He's got a lot of tentacles. He's got like hands everywhere. So going back to that connectedness, I've learned a lot about you because, number one, I think we have a lot in common because, again, right before this recording, I asked my wife, what do you think my brand is? And she said, you're a connector. And that's exactly what you just said about yourself, which was also solidified in a personality test that I took last year. And it's my number one trait was being a connector. It's like, you need this? Guess what? I know somebody who's got this. And so, that brand that you just laid out, I think has been helpful for me. It's been helpful to unpack this whole mystery of what is a brand in the first place. Hopefully it's been educational for other folks that have been listening as well. And so I really thank you for helping to kind of dissect this complex question and this thing that we've been trying to get after. I don't want to let you go yet, though, because I like to end every podcast with a little fun thing that I do, and it's called What Do You Prefer? It is a 10-question speed round, whatever comes to your mind. So I'm just going to dive right into it. Question number 1, when it comes to pizza, do you prefer fruit or no fruit?
Pizza?
Yes,
no fruit. No fruit.
I know some people that love pineapple on their pizza, Basketball greatness, Michael Jordan or LeBron James?
Michael Jordan.
Okay. Books, number 3, audio or paperback?
Paperback.
Gym, when you work out, leg day or arm day?
Gotta have them arms.
Gotta have the guns. Libations, if you do partake in them, do you prefer a cocktail or a glass of wine?
I prefer a cocktail, whiskey sour.
I can do some whiskey, definitely. Communication, as someone with your background, are you the type of person that says, hey, just send me a text, why are you calling me? Or, hey, don't text me, pick up the phone. So text or phone call?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think phone call, although, dealing with the generation of today, it is text, but I also will say I'm deviating from your speed round. I also like to look the person in the eye. And so I will meet with them in person too.
Nice, nice. Another thing we have in common is traveling. You're a well-traveled man, and I know for a fact that you have been a lot of places. And I have a goal to hit all 7 continents and to go all 50 states. And I'm at like 41 or something like that right now. So I know you're at 48. So when it comes to travel, do you prefer a road trip or would you rather take a flight?
At this point in my life, a flight. Back in the day, I didn't mind driving, but I prefer a flight at this point in my life.
Okay. Question number 8. When it comes to attire, do you prefer a t-shirt or a polo?
Polo. Got the polo on right now.
Gotcha. Number 9, heroes, Superman or Iron Man?
Ooh, I think Iron Man. One of my call signs is Iron Mike, so I got to go with Iron Man.
There you go. And someone who loves technology, I would imagine so.
Yes.
And number 10, last but not least, music, vinyl or digital?
I'm adapting to digital, but I got a bunch of boxes of vinyl down in the basement. Those 12-inch long plays and 12-inch singles, but digital. I mean, on your digital device, you can put a lot of stuff, a lot of songs and music on there. So it just makes it easier to transport and carry. And with technology that we're both involved in, you can just put more and more on your device today. So you have access to a lot more digitally.
Very nice, sir. Well, first of all, thank you for playing along in my speed round. It's always good to just end it and get into the mind of, outside the subject that we're talking about. And then secondly, really, really appreciative of your time for coming on to help share your knowledge, your wisdom, and just educate our audience members on what a brand is, how to maintain your brand and things of that sort. So, sir, thank you again for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Well, I do want to just take a minute, Shooter, and say thank you for what you do in this, and thank you for your passion in this. I've seen several of your Sensation Nation shows, and I'm a fan of many of the folks that you've had on, and have been fortunate enough to meet the likes of T.A. Adams, General Spencer that you've had on, and then General Flowers, as well as many others that you have done. But those that come to mind with what you've done, and just honored to be a part of this, and just thank you for your passion in doing this. And this is definitely part of your brand and your identity, and it shows that you're passionate, that you like doing this, and I appreciate that. It's a good teaching moment for our folks, and there are plenty of folks that get things out of this and get the opportunity to go behind the scenes with some of those folks that I just mentioned, and see what makes them tick and what they bring to the fight. So I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here on Sensation Nation. Colonel Michael Black, United States Air Force, retired. Until next time, I'm out.
All right.